In anticipation for more coming, right now on Verve, you can watch the original 131 episodes of Dragon Ball Super's first run, all the episodes in beautiful HD quality, subbed on Verve. Try it for free, vrv.co/geekdom, and get caught up with Super if you haven't seen it, or if you missed some episodes, or if you want to watch it again. When talking about the classic golden-haired Super Saiyan transformation, I feared making this video because I knew it was going to be very, very long because, let's be honest, there's a lot to talk about. Super Saiyan is one of the most iconic transformations and state of beings in all of anime. Pretty much everyone on Earth who has digested any form of media, even if you've never seen Dragon Ball Z, you know what a Super Saiyan looks like, even if you don't know what it's called. And there have been so many explanations and retcons and various versions of the story on how Super Saiyans work and which characters became Super Saiyans. So, to make this video as simple as possible here in the Geekdom 101 Transformation Guide, we're not going to focus on specific characters, we're going to focus on the actual Super Saiyan transformation, how it works, what triggers it, where Toriyama got the idea from. All that stuff will be featured here on this edition of the Geekdom 101 Transformation Guide as we discuss the Super Saiyan. As Toriyama was writing his manga weekly in Shonen Jump, he had to figure out new and creative ways to showcase his characters becoming stronger and stronger visually so that the reader could easily understand, and thus that's where the concept of transformations really became a thing in Dragon Ball. Now, transformations have always and probably will always be a trope of shonen, as it is a relatively easy way to show the reader growth within the power of a character visually. And as Toriyama was writing his manga, the idea of a Super Saiyajin, as it's stated in the Japanese version, was teased from the very beginning of the Dragon Ball Z portion, when Nappa briefly mentions a Super Saiyan. And as we go into the Frieza saga, we keep hearing about this legendary myth about a Super Saiyan who will one day rise and attain an incredible amount of power, which is something that Frieza ultimately feared, along with the fact that he feared the Saiyans will one day gain so much power that they would revolt against him, and that's why he ultimately wound up killing the entire race in a mass genocide of planet Vegeta. Of course, later on, this was somewhat retconned into where Beerus gave Frieza permission. You could still sense that the paranoia inside Frieza's head was building. Now, when Toriyama was first coming up with the Super Saiyan concept, it's pretty clear based on interviews that he wasn't entirely sure as to how he was going to make Goku look and how he would differentiate the way Goku would appear with this form. And prior to Goku becoming a Super Saiyan, we saw him use Kaioken and things that would sort of make Goku look bulkier and larger and have a different kind of aura. But this Super Saiyan was a totally new thing. And Toriyama once remarked that the reason as to why he chose to go with like a lighter sort of golden hair is so that his inker wouldn't spend so much time inking the dark hair for Goku, which of course was Toriyama kind of doing a little tongue-in-cheek joke. I don't think he was fully serious when he said that, but it's a great, brilliant idea to create something so iconic. Now, in Japan, it's commonly known in culture, at least it was back then, that people who had blonde hair were commonly seen as delinquents. And Toriyama really wanted to express that. Not to mention that if you really pay attention to the overall aesthetic of a Super Saiyan, you'll notice that they have a giant spiky golden hair and the pupils change color, resembling that of an Aryan blonde hair, blue or green-eyed individual, a pure blood according to many historical doctrines when you have that hair and eyes. But also, if you really pay attention, you can notice that Toriyama will draw the eyes very differently. When in Super Saiyan form, the eyes of these characters are surrounded by an outline like villains. And this was, of course, Toriyama wanting to showcase the anger and rage that must be present for a character to achieve this power. Now, one of the most commonly quoted lines from the English dub is when it's said that Super Saiyan comes from a need, not a desire. Now, that's only in the English dub, not in the manga, not in the Japanese version, and actually contradicts a lot of the things that we find out about Super Saiyan as the series progresses. For example, we know that when Goku first became a Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball Manga Chapter 317, which correlates to Dragon Ball Z Episode 95, we know that Goku triggered the form not just from all his training he was doing, but because he saw his best friend die right in front of him, and that triggered an incredible sense of anger and rage. But you can't say there's not a desire there when it came to other characters. For example, in the Cell Saga, characters like Future Trunks in the Trunks TV special, Vegeta in flashbacks, and of course Gohan desiring the power, training and training and training, and eventually achieving it. But then later on, characters like Goten and Trunks don't appear to have struggled whatsoever, at least in comparison to previous Super Saiyans. This, of course, would be explained recently in 2018 with Toriyama's very controversial introduction of S-Cells, which we're going to get to here shortly. In Dragon Ball Z episode 66, after witnessing Goku one-shot the seemingly invincible Raccoon from the Ginyu Force, Vegeta narrates a flashback where he illustrates the power of a Super Saiyan and the legend, and at one time, this was considered nothing but a myth and just superstition, and he states that we have not seen a Super Saiyan for over 1,000 years prior to the Frieza saga. Now, obviously, Goku's transformation was totally triggered by his rage and anger against Frieza, and Vegeta's, which would be explained later on in Dragon Ball during the fight with the artificial humans, the androids, his would be triggered by his desire to surpass or become equal to Goku after witnessing both Goku and the mysterious youth from the future, Trunks, also achieving the form. It was shocking to him that there was another Super Saiyan besides just Goku, and this was enough for him to say, hey, I'm slacking, I gotta catch up. Now, it was implied that you have to have a pure heart to be a Super Saiyan, and Vegeta, of course, snarkingly remarks that he's got a pure heart, but it's pure evil, which was probably him just talking trash. I don't think we should put too much stock into that quote. With the early Super Saiyans, not only did you have to have an incredible amount of rage and anger, but you also had to do an extensive amount of training to achieve the form, to prepare your body for the form. But in more recent incarnations of Dragon Ball overall, there's obviously different pathways to take. Because when you watch Dragon Ball or when you read the manga, there are many moments where Goku is indeed filled with rage. One big example is when Krillin was killed at the end of the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai by Tambourine. Goku was filled with rage but did not trigger the transformation despite being a lifelong martial artist and being very angry, which, as I stated before, as Toriyama continued to write the manga, he would sort of retcon and change the conditions for becoming a Super Saiyan. When we get to Goten, for example, he was able to obtain Super Saiyan not only at a very young age, but also more instinctively rather than as a result of anger. Now, throughout the years, many fans have theorized that the reasons as to why Goten and Trunks were able to achieve the form at such a young age with seemingly no real threat or no real need to do it is because of the fact that when they were originally conceived by Goku and Vegeta respectively, Goku and Vegeta had become so powerful that they almost transferred their energy, their power, through their sperm into, this is wacky, but people believe that this is what happened, that that's why Goten and Trunks became stronger. Even though that's not explicitly stated in the series, it's very possible that because Goku and Vegeta's bodies were so much more powerful than Goku's was when he first conceived Gohan, that it is, a theory that I think has made a lot of sense. But Dragon Ball Super really turned the tide when it came to explaining Super Saiyan. Dragon Ball Super introduced us to Universe 6 and the Universe 6 Saiyans from the Universe 6 version of Planet Sadala. We do find out that the Saiyans from Universe 7 were also in their version of Planet Sadala before Planet Vegeta was a thing, and they would eventually migrate over, but we'll talk about that in a separate video. But what we find out from Kaba from Universe 6 is that the Universe 6 Saiyans don't appear to have any sort of knowledge of Super Saiyan. Now, Universe 6 Saiyans have some very interesting biological differences from their Universe 7 counterparts. Pure-blooded Universe 7 Saiyans have tails and can become great apes, whereas Universe 6 Saiyans have evolved past the need for having a tail. Besides that, Universe 6 Saiyans are seen more benevolent. They are keepers of the peace as opposed to Universe 7, who is violent, rage-filled, fighting enthusiasts. Now, it is not made clear exactly as to how many years Kaba and the other Universe 6 Saiyans experienced heavy combat, We don't know how much training Kaba actually did prior to his meeting with Vegeta, but when he did first meet Vegeta, Vegeta taunted him and punked him out and triggered the transformation based on Kaba's energy. Now, later on in Dragon Ball Super, when Kaba tries to teach Caulifla how to do the transformation, he talks about having a tingling sensation in one's back and then focusing the energy from the spinal area to tap into the form. Caulifla did it and she was able to achieve the transformation. There was no real anger here and no real rage involving this form. So it's unclear as to whether or not Toriyama just decided to give different pathways to becoming a Super Saiyan or if he just changed his mind. I like to believe that there are different pathways to achieving the form. Not only is it rage and anger with heavy training, not only is it recognizing the tingly feeling, which I did do a video with Kendamu in the past, showcasing and explaining where they got this idea from, and it's totally from Japanese martial arts, specifically Asian biological lore, which I will link at the end of this video for you to watch because we go into really in-depth stuff there. But not just those two methods, but also S cells, which I think is Toriyama's most controversial explanation of how Super Saiyans work. So what are S cells? In a recent interview with Toriyama in 2018, we found out that S cells are microscopic cells found in the blood of pure blood Saiyans and of course their hybrid offsprings. Now what makes this whole Toriyama explanation of this interesting is that the amount of S cells in your body, the higher amount means you have a higher chance of becoming a Super Saiyan or of triggering higher levels of power. But it explains that the more gentle your spirit is, the calmer your environment is around you, the more S cells you have. But as you train and get stronger, you develop more. And of course, eventually you trigger the transformation by having something happen that's traumatic in a way, and you become a Super Saiyan. Now, this explanation works to a degree, but it also falls apart. And it's very, very controversial and split down the middle when it comes to the fandom. Although the S cells explanation does help to explain how Goten and Trunks were able to achieve this power so young, because unlike Vegeta and Goku, they weren't raised in constant battles. Unlike the Saiyans of Planet Vegeta, they weren't always fighting all the time, which did make them get stronger, but they didn't have any peacetime. It appears like it also contradicts the entire purpose of having training and rage and everything that made up the Super Saiyan transformation in the original manga. So the way it's kind of interpreted by me is that the more S cells you have, the more peaceful you are, the higher chance you have of achieving this power without needing the emotional stress. And to me, this could actually be the explanation as to why so many Saiyans for so many centuries were unable to get this power, because they were always fighting and there was no actual peacetime and no purity. But it does, again, contradict the original manga in a way, but it also reminds me way too much of midi-chlorians, and Star Wars fans despised the Force being explained to them through science. So I think here we have a clear martial arts Taoistic approach to Super Saiyan being erased by science, and that could bother a lot of Dragon Ball fans. Also, a lot of fans felt that this was just Toriyama trying to write his way out of a hole and write his way out of explaining as to why so many characters were able to get this form. Even Vegeta himself calls it a Super Saiyan bargain sale. At one time, the only real Super Saiyans in the original manga were Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, and future Trunks, the two surviving purebloods that we knew about back then, and their children. And then as the series progressed, we saw Goten, Trunks, Universe 6 Saiyans, later on Broly, when he witnessed his father dying, triggered that rage. We've seen this a lot in Dragon Ball, where the properties of becoming a Super Saiyan have changed. But ultimately, when you think about there being separate pathways to get to the form, that to me is the best explanation to where everything kind of makes sense. Am I covering up Toriyama's retconning? No, absolutely not. I do think that some characters get too strong too fast, but either way, that's the only explanation that really makes sense to me. And if you factor in the end of Dragon Ball GT, where we see Goku Jr. and Vegeta Jr., who have extremely diluted blood, successfully transform, you can then figure out that that Saiyan blood and the ability to become a Super Saiyan is not indicative of how much pure blood you have in your bloodline. If you have any blood in your bloodline and some S cells, you can do it. Now, obviously, GT was written way before Dragon Ball Super, and way before Toriyama came up with this, but it's almost like he's trying to explain things, but forgetting that, hey, what about all the angry moments Goku had when he was a kid? Or Vegeta's battles? Why couldn't he do it? It's weird. For 3 decades, the Super Saiyan transformation has been the measuring stick in Dragon Ball for power and a pop culture phenomenon, but it was not the most powerful form in the series or even close to being the maximum level of strength that these characters could achieve. In the forthcoming editions of the Geekdom 101 Transformation Guide, we're going to take an in-depth look at the Super Saiyan mutations that came after the traditional base Super Saiyan. There are many transformations in Dragon Ball, and we've only scraped the surface. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.